Chapter 8, Count Worksheet. So our liquor inventory software, as we call it, SARA, is basically a very fancy Excel spreadsheet. Excel spreadsheets are made up of worksheets, which are like pages or tabs. Note that I use the words tab and worksheet interchangeably. I tend to use the word tab since it's more familiar to people. It makes sense. If I'm talking to clients who maybe aren't so Excel nerdy, I'll use the word tab. The word worksheet is more proper and is best used if you're talking to Excel nerds. So if I'm talking with our developers, we always do that. But the worksheet of the counting tool where you spend most of the time is the count tab or count worksheet. And the count tab is obviously where we enter all of the counts and weights of items we're accounting, where we look up items using their barcodes. And so we should become familiar with the following columns in the count tab. To save you looking through this, I'm going to read through my notes as I show you this. So here I am. You can see this is a C tool for a bar we have in Denver called Brick. And I'm here on the count tool. So these are all my different tabs or worksheets I was talking that perform different functions. The yellow ones are where we're going to enter data. So the count worksheet is yellow. The green ones are it's kind of the results. And then there's some other background ones that we don't use as often, are in different colors. So let's have a look at what all these different columns are. This is the view you'll use, and obviously we've already filled this in. So let's, without further ado, run through this. So the product position number, this column right here, it shows how many times a particular vessel is in the counting map up to this point. So for example, if the product position number is 4, this is the 4th place the particular vessel appears in the map to this point. So let me show you what I mean by this. So Cuddy Sark 1, this means the first place we find Cuddy Sark in the map, and this second column, the of column, of 1. So this means that Cuddy Sark during this count was only found once. In contrast, if we take something like Sky Vodka, 1 and 3 means this is the first location of 3 in total. If I go ahead and copy that, use my keyboard shortcuts and do a search, switching over to values, I can see the second place is 2 of 3, and the third place, which actually didn't have a count today but we left in case it's back next time, is 3rd of 3. So when I click it one more time, we'll go back to first. So that's the point of those first 2 columns. So next up, column J is the zone name. That identifies the area we're counting in, and I think you know by now that if you look, all of the zone names are in full caps, in uppercase, whereas our instructions are always in lowercase, and those are also in the zone name column. And then we're using abbreviations such as for a description, say start behind main bar, and then that MB description is used at the start here. So a few important things about zone names. We use very granular zones, so a particular shelf at the left-hand side of a shelf could be a zone. You'll notice with other inventory systems, their zones are things like liquor storage area. We have said much more micro zones, so they're broken up. So a few points about zones to bear in mind is the first one is that zones are unique. So no 2 zones in the same bar have the same name. So make sure that you're not reusing them. For instance, cooler left and cooler right isn't very helpful if they've got 3 coolers. So obviously we would number the coolers. Another one is that zones are descriptive, so they verbally describe a location, e.g. liquor store top shelf could be a zone name, though in most cases we use abbreviations so they fit better. And then zone names follow an order of least specific to most specific. They start with the general area of the bar you're in, such as the main bar. Next they describe what you're counting, either like a reach-in cooler or a shelf, and they finish with the position, like left side top shelf. And the idea is that ideally if 2 employees set up the same bar separately, the order of the map and zones used would be pretty much the same. We use a few different abbreviations, so pretty much a lot of bars have these zones. So the MB is used for main bar, BB is used for back bar, UB for upstairs bar, and DB not for douchebag but for downstairs bar. LS for liquor store, DS for dry storage, WI for walk-in cooler, OS for outside storage, and then also we have some abbreviations for different types of storage. So SL is a sliding door cooler, RI is a reach-in cooler, which regular doors that swing open on hinges, that's probably the most common. And then RT is those roll-top coolers where you access them from the top, and those are most commonly used by bars that do a lot of volume in domestic beer, and they'll have those bottles lying down their side. So nightclubs, higher volume bottled bars will have those. So just to show an example here, I've got main bar, and then it will go through the pyramid, go through the shelves, Then we get into here. This is a better example where I can show you in the main bar, reach in 1. So we talked about the Pacific area as main bar, and then the location is the reach in number 1. And then we're doing the left side, obviously start with. There's a sneaky shelf there. But there's main bar reach in left, where they've actually got kegs, so we don't have to break that up. But then as we get into the middle section has kegs and the right section has kegs, but then we'll see when we transition now into reach in number 2, we have to be more granular because we've got shelves in here. So in reach in number 2, we've got main bar reach number 2, we've got the left hand side, and we've got the top shelf, and then we've got the bottom sneaky shelf, and then the left hand side bottom shelf. So probably it looks a little bit confusing, but within these 3 zones we've got, they're all main bar reach in 2. We've got left top, left bottom sneak, and left bottom. And then we would go to main bar reach in 1, the right hand side of the cooler, and obviously the top shelf and then the bottom shelf. So hopefully you can see now the sequential order. So least specific is the general area MB, then the location like the reach in cooler and which number it is, and then we're talking about product shelf position. So again, most or least specific to most specific. Important thing to bear in mind there. So the next column is this column K, is the vessel column. So this is the name of the vessel. Remember that a vessel is a specific size of a product. So if I say Jack Daniels, that's a product. If I say Jack Daniels liter, that's a vessel, or Jack Daniels 750. So the name of the vessel which is counted on this line is called is a vessel. There are Excel formulas in this column which look up the name of the vessel based on the entry in column M. So you can see, for instance, here for St. Brendan's, we had to rescan. We scanned this barcode in column M, and it looked up using this fancy code here that I've exposed. You can see this is pretty complicated. If you haven't done a lot of Excel, that's going to look rather bewildering. The point being, what it's doing is it's looking up this, it's looking into the mass list and figuring out which vessel it is, and in this case it's St. Brendan's 1 liter. That makes sense because it looks up this and displays the information here, but you'll notice on this one, on Bailey's, both of these columns are displaying the same word, but this is the vessel name where it's displaying what we're counting, and a little bit here, this is where we identify or make changes to what we're counting. So they're going to look the same when they're counted, but just bear in mind, this is what we display, and this is the column where we indicate what we're counting. It will load with the name from last time, but we'll be able to scan barcodes, and then it will look up here. So then next up in column L, we have the weigh count column. This is the column where you enter the weight or count of the vessels you're counting on this line. For an open vessel, we put the cursor into this column and then put the bottle on the scale, and it will write it directly in and then move the cursor down. Our new scales actually would do this in a slightly different format. They would have a bunch of zeros at the start here. It's plus, and then there's a bunch of zeros. So if you're using the A&D scale, the output will look something more like that. So as you can see here, if it's partial items, we call them, that are open, we'll weigh them. And if they're full items, such as here, they've got some liquor bottles in here that are open, not uncommon to have their shot products in there and cold, but then also their bottled products are obviously entering the counts. Next is the tag column. Tag, kind of another name for a barcode, but this is the column where we indicate this is what displays what we're counting. This column is where we select what we're counting. So as I said, it's going to load with what it was there last time. We can scan barcodes, and in the case of our self-count clients, there's a drop-down menu. They can select that alphabetically. We don't really use drop-down menus because we're faster at using Excel, and so rather than that, we would look on the main master list. So the next column here in column N is the units column. This is the number of vessels which are counted or weighed on this line. So if you're weighing partial vessels, the column will allow you to confirm how full the bottle is, as it converts the raw count into a tenth. So for instance, on this 2 bottles of Bailey's we had here, we weighed one that's basically full, so it displays it as 1, and we weighed this one as 0.5. And obviously you can visually confirm if that bottle was about half full. That makes perfect sense. But if it was way off, you'd know that the tare weight or some other problem. Maybe you'd not realize you're putting a 750 on there, but that's a good sanity check when you're not sure that something's going right. Next up in column O, we've got the all day count. So the all day count counts the total number of this type of vessel which have been counted in the map everywhere. This line totals all the places where a particular vessel has been counted. Note on the counting worksheet, we're counting at the vessel level. So this is going to list the total number of vessels of the same size only. What the heck do I mean by that? What I mean is if we happen to have, sorry, I've jumped, my mouse is being funny today, but if we happen to have, for instance, kettle 1, if we have kettle 1, and this is obviously a liter bottle, but if we had it also in 750s, this all-day count of 2.8 is the total number of counts of liter bottles. And if we have 750s, that's going to be different because we would collapse the two different sizes of kettle 1 together, but that doesn't happen yet on this sheet. So at the moment we're working at the vessel level, and as said, it's just going to give the counts here, and we know from earlier that this kettle 1 here is 1 of 2, means that it's stored in 2 locations, so we know that we've got a 0.8 here, and somewhere else on the map we must have 2 full bottles we've counted. Second last one is this vessel count or zone count column. This lists the total number of vessels which have been counted in a particular zone. It's particularly important because it allows us to make double checks on our counts, confirming the total number of vessels in each zone. And so this is most relevant when we're into full bottles. So in this case, they've got a high shelf behind the bar where they keep quite a lot of different products. And so this high shelf left and right, you know, we've split this zone into 2 in left and right. Obviously, you know, I've got 2 of these, and in total there are 43 bottles. So if I was using this count worksheet, what I would be doing is using my voice command, 2 enter, 2 enter, 2 enter, etc. You know, 2 enter, 1 enter, 1 enter, and then because I would be running this in manual mode most likely, if I change this to 12, this column here, the zone count, won't update. If I put this in manual mode, I press Control-Shift-F. So when I change this now, you'll see this 53 is going to stay the same even if I change this to 1. But if I said save it, it would save and this will then update. So what we recommend is counting all the items in a zone, not looking at the zone count column, and then doing Control-S. And before you've looked and cheated and see what this number is, go back and count them from right to left, the opposite way to which you counted. That will give a good sanity check to make sure you're not making errors. And then column Q here. Column Q here has this one active cell. As you probably know, there are 2 different ways we can weigh our kegs. We can use a scale, in which case we have to physically pick them up. If you're fortunate with a client that only has half barrel and euro size kegs, then we can use the keg stick, and in which case we'd need to turn this to stick, otherwise it will not interpret the data correctly. Let me just give you an example of that. So if I find here my reach-in coolers, which I've gone too far past. So sorry about that, we got there in the end. If you see here, so I've entered these weights for these 6-door kegs. Obviously we can't use the keg check, and so these were weights in pounds. But you see these will make sense. This is a 0.2, 0.1, etc. If I select deliberately the wrong setting and then update the software, you'll see it thinks there's 24 kegs here, not a 0.1. So obviously it's very important that you use that correctly. By default it's set to scale, and it's important just that you have that correct. And then finally, we don't use this very often. You can see this view here where I can see column H through column Q is what we're typically the view we're using when we're counting. But if I've got a problem with Bailey's, I mentioned earlier that on this 0.5 that made sense. But if I noticed that actually it was a 0.7 and I wanted to investigate that, what I can do is scroll over to the left here, and you can see the assumptions that have been looked up on this product. So this is the vessel name. So this is the actual product name, so we can see what it's collapsing into. It belongs to the liquor category, of course, and then it lists 3 pieces of information. The density is one we're not going to deal with too much. The size is important. You can confirm, yes, that this is a liter bottle. You'll become pretty familiar with the sizes of things in ounces. And then the tare weight here is important because we could check that. So if you ever get unusual results on occasion, you can check here and have a quick look up. Of course, the other option I could do is simply copy the name of the product, or the name of the vessel, I'm sorry, and do a search in Excel, and it would look up the same information. So obviously that 33.82, 26.82, and 1.05 is the same information that's being pulled through here for ease and simplicity. So that's a quick look around your counting worksheet. You'll become very familiar. Certainly the worksheet we're going to spend a lot of time, but thanks for watching.